I call this meeting to order. Welcome
Bonjour.
to 3 of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. We are meeting today to resume our study on the implications of the Canada-China Preliminary Joint Agreement on Canada's electric vehicle sector. Just a heads up to all the members, I'll be saving a few minutes at the end of our meeting to discuss some committee scheduling. So I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of all the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And with that, I would like to welcome our witnesses for our first panel. We are joined by Margaret McCoig-Johnston, Senior Fellow, University of Ottawa. She is here in person. Welcome. We are also joined by David Shipley, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Buchanan Security. And our third witness for this panel is Madame Rachel Doran, Executive Director from Clean Energy Canada, and she's joining by video conference. All the witnesses will have 5 minutes for their opening remarks, and then we will go into a round of questioning. And with that, I will request Madame McCoig-Johnston to please start. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Thank you.
In my positions with Innovaction, Science Strategy, the Prime Minister's National Advisory Board on Science and Technology, Advanced Manufacturing Technologies, and ADM positions at Department of Finance, NRCan, and NSERC, my career has focused on science and technology policy, programs, and funding, including initiating Canada's technology roadmap for electric vehicles so that Canadian companies could be major players in the sector. And with a master's focused on China and speaking Mandarin since 1979, I was often asked to lead delegations to China and help them build their R&D capacity. I therefore see China through the lens of technology. And as I've focused in recent years on China's surveillance technologies, I've seen clearly the risks they pose to people in China as well as to Canadians. That's why I'm concerned with the prospect of Chinese EVs coming here. I'd first like to address the serious risks posed by the Baidu software in the vehicles that are to be imported, including Teslas and other Western cars made in China. Simply put, the data from the microphones, cameras, and GPS are stored in China, where they can be reviewed by Chinese officials using algorithms. In addition, any firm or individual in China must spy for Beijing if requested. We've seen that vehicles can be remote controlled from China, and U.S. Department of Energy report says that a surge through the cars while they're charging would destabilize the electricity grid and cause brownouts. We simply can't have such vehicles on our roads. Any that arrive must use QNX software by BlackBerry, with data stored in Canada. While QNX is used in some Chinese vehicles, Chinese authorities there require that their data be stored in China. This is not acceptable for cars coming to Canada. Furthermore, I've done a 6-year study of dozens of Canadian technology company joint ventures with Chinese partners. All of them have had problems, most of them serious. If we have joint ventures here in auto technology, we should have technology transferred to Canadian firms. But their foreign investment law says Chinese authorities are not permitted to require a company to share its IP with a foreign firm. Chinese officials may say they will try to do that, but in the final analysis they will say our hands are tied. And there is a strong business culture in China that no technology must be shared outside the firm. So we shouldn't be expecting that to happen. I've spoken elsewhere about the risks of the aluminum in the vehicles as coming from unpaid Uyghur forced labor. With increased attention being devoted to that issue, I and several others wrote a constructive letter to the Prime Minister about the gaps that Canada has in 2026 regarding its forced labor policy enforcement, in contrast to what it was doing just last year. Canadians don't want to be driving cars made by slaves. In addition, it's critically important that we be in a strong position to defend our enforcement of forced labor policies in the face of the U.S. Section 301 investigation, which will assess Canada's current practices. If they determine that we've dropped the ball, all Canadian products entering the U.S. could face tariffs of 25%. Worse, while we've called for verifiable transparency in supply chains, Beijing brought in a new national security regulation on April 7th, after our letter to the PM was sent, that prohibits anyone in China from revealing any information on their supply chains. Executives of foreign firms asking whether products come from Xinjiang could be banned from leaving the country, or worse. Why would Beijing pass such a regulation? Because they don't want anyone to know. Now we're left to accept that the aluminum is made with forced labor, but importing products made in whole or in part with forced labor into Canada is illegal. Given that, I don't see how we can import the cars at all, but we know a consequence could be Beijing punishing our canola farmers for the fourth time. We should be diversifying our canola trade away from China as a top priority, or find that every Canadian foreign policy is subject to Beijing's approval. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will now go to Mr. Shipley. Mr. Shipley, please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Chair, committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to appear again to talk about this issue. I want to begin with a simple truth. The issues I'm going to speak to are not just about Chinese vehicles, and they are not limited to electric vehicles. I'm going to focus on the issues around connectivity. And I've provided some images to help show you what I mean. And it's been provided by the clerk to your email. Unfortunately, I can't share it by screen. But in Exhibit A, there is a photo that shows a display of the modern software-defined car, and it comes from Hyundai's User Experience Lab in Seoul, where I recently visited. Exhibit B shows a modern steering wheel, and what's important to note is there's no mechanical link to the front wheels. It's drive-by-wire. Software controls the steering. Exhibit C is the wireless connectivity functionality and secure gateway systems on this computer on wheels. And Exhibit D is the fuse box, which is the last best opportunity to intervene for safety and privacy. The architecture that I've shown you in those images isn't unique to Hyundai or electric vehicles. It's in almost every new Ford, Toyota, Honda in Canadian driveways today. An F-150 is just as much a computer on wheels. So is a Civic, and so on. And if someone can connect to them, they can find ways to hack them. In 2015, security researchers remotely took over a Jeep Cherokee on a highway with a Wired magazine journalist behind the wheel. In a parking lot, they cut the transmission at speed and later demonstrated control of the steering and brakes when it was in a parking lot. One vulnerability forced the recall of 1.4 million vehicles. Little has changed in vehicle cybersecurity over the past decade. Last year, researchers at Black Hat Asia demonstrated how they compromised a 2020 Nissan Leaf through its Bluetooth connection, pivoted through the internal network, set up persistent remote access over the cellular modem. From there, they controlled the doors, the wipers, the horn, the camera, the in-cabin microphone, the steering wheel, including while the car was in motion. It took Nissan more than 18 months to resolve that. Earlier this year, a cyber attack took down a Russian alarm system provider serving multiple car brands. Thousands of drivers could not unlock their cars or start their engines. Some reported engines shutting down while driving. If anyone in the committee believes that the hardware and software designed outside of China is immune from their advanced state hacking teams, the examples I've provided show evidence to the contrary. All software can be hacked. Banning Chinese branded cars will not stop China's advanced hacking teams. They'll redirect their efforts. They'll look for holes in every other manufacturer. They will look for holes in the cloud platforms every automaker now runs, and they will find them. The risks are not unique to Chinese EVs, and it would be a catastrophic mistake to think they will not hack other cars to achieve their same objectives. China has demonstrated capability and audacity to hack into even the most sensitive government systems. They can and will hack connected cars. Last year, we learned a Chinese state group called Salt Typhoon lived inside AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and at least 6 other American telecoms for 3 years undetected. They compromised the very wiretap systems the US government built for itself. Canada's own cyber agency co-signed the public warning. They broke back into those very same systems this March. And by the way, China did not invent this playbook. The Snowden disclosures showed that Western governments have pressured companies to compromise technology in the interest of their states. And if we're going to take this entire issue seriously, we need to take it seriously for every vehicle on Canadian roads from every jurisdiction. And now I want to focus on what keeps me up at night. Espionage and privacies are real risks. They are serious, but they aren't at the top of my list. Physical safety is. A compromised phone can leak your location or listen to conversations. A compromised car at 100 kilometers an hour is a 2-ton weapon. And the pool of people who can wield that weapon is widening. State services are no longer our only concern. A domestic abuser tracking a partner through a vehicle app. A grievance-driven misanthrope egged on by online radicalization groups like the COM. A ransomware crew. Apps and AI tools are lowering the skill floor for exploitation, and Canada does not have a framework to detect, deter, or respond effectively to any of this. We are behind, and the risk grows every day, not only from the PRC. I made recommendations earlier this year to the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology that would help us address these risks. First, a physical disconnect requirement. Every connected vehicle sold in Canada should include a clearly identified hardware switch or fuse that can sever cellular and wireless external communications at the owner's discretion. A real one, not a software toggle. This power down is the last best option, and no, AI can't override physics. Second, a connected car
Sorry for
bill of
interrupting.
rights.
If you can quickly wind up, please.
Sure, a connected car bill of rights so that people can have guarantees around security. And third, security is a baseline regulatory requirements. We would never allow a car on Canadian roads with defective brakes. We should not allow cars on Canadian roads with known defective cybersecurity.
We will now go to Madame Duran. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. She's representing Clean Energy Canada. Thank you.
Bon matin, members of the committee, Madam Chair. Clean Energy Canada is a national think tank at Simon Fraser University focused on advancing the country's energy transition. I want to acknowledge, as the other speakers have spoken to, this committee is studying a complicated issue that involves geopolitics, security, technology shift, but these are issues that attract to much of the relationship with and trade with Canada and China, which is Canada's second largest trading partner. Just to zoom in on electric vehicles for a moment, there are a few key facts. Electric vehicles will save Canadians money, period. Electric vehicles reduce carbon emissions over their lifetime versus a fossil fuel-powered vehicle, period. Electric vehicles are at the bottom of a long ladder of technologies we can electrify that will improve efficiency, affordability, and people's lives, which is why they're the first technology to kick off a global shift to electrification, period. In the last period, the global auto sector is undergoing a rapid transformation. EVs are expected to make up 30% of new sales worldwide this year and 40% by 2030. China is poised to see a sales share of around 80% by this time. China bet on electric vehicles almost 2 decades ago and now has a head start in technology, producing cost reductions in exports that can dominate global markets. You can't have a strategy around the future of transportation without having a China strategy, period. In summer 2024, when Canada first announced the 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, we noted that the federal government had had an opportunity to take a measured approach that balanced the priorities of traditional automakers in Canada's local industry with the needs of affordability-constrained Canadian consumers and our climate. Instead, Canada started with a 100% tariff approach, one that mirrored only the US at that time, while Ethiopia, Australia, Brazil, UK, Nepal gained access to lower-priced Chinese EVs and experienced the massive savings that come from these vehicles. Our recent analysis shows in Canada that these savings can be between $23,000 and $32,000 over 10 years of vehicle ownership. This year, we ran those for vehicles currently on the market today and a comparator of 2 popular Chinese models without the federal rebate that could make their way to the Canadian market potentially. And these figures were before the recent hikes in gas prices. To be clear, Clean Energy Canada does not support fully opening domestic markets to Chinese EVs at this time. But if Canada wants to have an auto sector in the future, let alone a competitive one, we need to be able to produce high-quality, affordable EVs and the parts and materials that go into them. And I quote, technological and production cost reduction advancements by Chinese automakers and battery manufacturers present an opportunity for Canada to diversify its electric vehicle supply chains through strategic partnerships. Now, that's not Clean Energy Canada, that's the chief economist of TD Bank in 2025. While unrestricted exposure risks wiping out domestic industry, controlled competition forces domestic manufacturers to step up their game and learn. Joint ventures can help bring technology and know-how to our manufacturing base. This can all drive innovation and productivity gains while leading to better cars for consumers. Take the EU, which reached 27% new electric car sales in 2025. It maintains tariffs on Chinese EVs, but lower and more flexible tariffs. It has over 20 EV models available at sub $40,000 Canadian price points. Only 7 of those are from Chinese brands and 10 are from European. Chinese EV manufacturing plants have led to investments up the supply chain for local suppliers. Last June, BYD announced that Voestalpine, an Australian steel manufacturer, will supply their $6 billion EV plant in Hungary. Similarly, Forvia, a French car parts supplier, has signed a deal with BYD's second EV factory in Turkey. Some local suppliers have cited falling demand from existing automakers as an issue that Chinese automakers can make up for. A two-pronged approach of selective exposure to Chinese EVs and opening the market simply back to 2023 levels or below 3% of the market, plus preferential market access for domestic producers is a better path for Canadian auto sector competitiveness into the future. But at the end of the day, the Canadian government also needs to be standing up for Canadian consumers. Canadians want these vehicles and believe they'll be of high quality. Our January 2026 polling shows that more than 1/3 of Canadians are open to buying a Chinese EV. And among the 50% of Canadians who are interested in an EV generally, 70% of those express varying levels of interest in getting a Chinese one. By allowing the sale of a limited number of Chinese EVs into Canada at a lower tariff rate, and by reserving a rising portion of this quota for EVs with an import price of less than $35,000, Canada is making the right choice, focused on creating the affordable EV segment we've been missing, while setting us up for success in a swiftly changing global market.
Thank you. And with that, we will now start with our first round of questioning of 6 minutes each, and we will begin with MP Baldinelli for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. Ms. McQuaig-Johnson, I'm going to begin with you, if I could. The Liberal government wants to call importing Chinese EVs an affordability measure. Do you think vehicles made with forced labor that collect and transmit Canadian personal data and information back to Beijing undercut our Canadian auto workers, which, employs hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs for Canadians? Do you think that could ever be considered a good affordability measure for the Canadian public?
I don't, and I'm very concerned about our auto workers. There was no consultation with our Canadian auto manufacturers in the course of these negotiations, and you see that by the fact that I think they weren't aware of things like, they should have been aware, but weren't of things like the forced labor in the vehicles, the software risks in the vehicles. And I would mention specifically the EU tariffs. When you talk about affordability, the EU tariffs have been lower, up to 35%. But the EU found that this was eating into not just the comparable competition from EU vehicle manufacturers, but even combustion engines and even used car sales. And so what they've done is they're getting rid of the tariffs. Vehicle manufacturers in China can opt for them if they want. So SAIC has opted to keep its 35% tariff. The others are negotiating prices that will be up at the same level as the competition. What we're doing here in Canada is the reverse. We're going way, way below the competition. And when I say competition, we've heard that Chinese EVs are just 3% of the Canadian car market. Well, when you look at electric vehicle sales, and you've heard the number at this committee of 30% of electric vehicle sales. That's if you include buses and electric vehicle trucks. I asked the president of Electric Autonomy to cut the numbers for me so that it would carve out the autos and SUVs. And the number of sales in 2025 was 123,000. And so 49,000 of that is 46%. So it's 46%, not 30. And that rises to 70% quickly. And that's way more than half, 57%. So the Chinese EVs within a couple of years will be getting way more than half of all the EV sales last year in Canada.
Just going to follow up. I mean, during your most recent appearance at the Industry Committee, a Liberal government member questioned your credentials and expertise as an expert witness who can credibly speak about forced labor taking place in China. I'd like to give you an opportunity to comment that, as well as on a recent United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner release, which was issued in January. It was entitled UN Experts Alarmed by Reports of Forced Labor of Uyghur, Tibetan, and Other Minorities Across China. And then that release, it says, according to the experts, forced labor in China is enabled through the state-mandated poverty alleviation through labor transfer program, which coerces Uyghurs and members of other minority groups into jobs in Xinjiang and other regions. Just like to get your comments.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your question. I appreciate the member's question, Madam Chair. And I also appreciate the fact that this has raised the issue of forced labor sky high. And so a group of us has taken the opportunity to write to the Prime Minister to propose areas where we think Canada has backtracked this calendar year on its enforcement of forced labor, and what we can do to get back to what we were doing just last year, because this is really important if we're going to be successful in the Section 301 investigation. I must say that the member who took me to task at the last meeting was lauded in state media in China, and the story went all across social media in China. He's a hero and I'm a zero, and that's a problem for me because I have a lot of friends and former colleagues in China who I can't communicate with now because I'm sanctioned, and I can't tell them what happened and what the impact has been here. But I've been hearing from a lot of Han Chinese, who have been saying that they too have been subject to forced labor in China. So that's something that I'm going to be responding to.
If I could you table with this committee the letter that you've written to the Prime Minister?
Yes, I've given that to the clerk.
Okay, thank you. Secondly,
and it's being translated by the Industry Committee already.
I don't think members of the public are aware of the U.S. investigation, that 301 investigation, with regards to forced labor, and investigating, I think, up to 60 countries. What is the impact of that, and what could it be on our CUSMA negotiations?
Sorry for interrupting. Maybe you can come back to those answers in the second round. And time is up for MP Baltanelli, and now we will proceed to MP Noor Mohammed for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
I want to thank all the witnesses for being here, and I want to begin by saying that I have, for a very long time, like others from all parties, been deeply concerned about workers' rights, not selectively. I think issues that many have raised in China and other parts of the world are real concerns that we should be mindful of in the agreements that we strike and in the way that we position conversations that we have. And I'm sorry, Professor McQuaig-Johnson, for the challenges that you are now dealing with. I want to bring us back to the conversation that we are having here about domestic issues related to Chinese EVs and their sale in Canada. And I also want to sort of talk a little bit about the broader question of data, because you and a couple of other witnesses have mentioned data, the ability of cars to be taken over, so on and so forth, and sort of we've heard the experience from Mr. Shipley about the issues related to cars being taken over and Nissan's challenges. Are you concerned about, Professor McQuaig-Johnson, are you concerned about Polestar 2s that were sold in Canada prior to 2025?
I haven't looked into that particular brand.
Okay, so the Polestar 2s were manufactured in China and then were sold in Canada prior to the 100% tariffs, and then were no longer sold in Canada as part of course, the agreement or the JV with Volvo around those cars. Should we be concerned about cars that were manufactured prior to 2025 as well?
I would say it entirely depends upon the software that's used. If it's Baidu software, then yes. If it's QNX, then I would want to double check that data is being kept in in Canada.
So in digging into the question of data, given the complexity of Canada's relationship with the U.S. right now, given the ownership structure of Tesla, and given Elon Musk's relationships, for example, with the U.S. government and with U.S. government decisions in respect of data that is stored in the U.S., should Canadians be concerned or equally concerned about information that their Tesla might be gathering and then that will then be living on U.S. servers, which the U.S. government could access if it so chose under the Cloud Act?
Well, certainly the Teslas that will be coming and some have already come from Shanghai use Baidu software. So that's Chinese.
I'm talking about the ones that are already in Canada that are where Tesla data is stored on U.S. servers.
Right. I wouldn't be as concerned because we have seen China's malign intent towards Canada in a much larger way than we have from the U.S. Now, I know that we have a very erratic U.S. president right now, and I know that there's a significant concern about U.S. fighter jets that store their data in the U.S., and that must be controlled and updated from the U.S. as a condition of sale. So it's a good question. I would want to look at what might be done with the QNX software, with BlackBerry keeping it in Canada. If we're going to do that for Chinese EVs, then we should do that perhaps for U.S. EVs as well. That's not a bad idea.
And obviously, requirements under PIPEDA apply to any vehicles or any software, any data that is collected and stored in Canada, correct?
Madam Chair, I didn't quite get the question.
So PIPEDA, which applies to applies to all transactions being done in Canada, whether it's data collected, so on and so forth. Would that my understanding is applies to any EVs, theoretically Chinese and others, that come to Canada, correct?
I don't know. That's
okay, so the agreement, it does, and I think this is one of the things that we need to dissect a little bit, because I want to make sure, like you, that Canadians are kept safe. And there's several separate issues, right? One is, of course, the issue related to labor in China. There's the issue related to making sure that we're protecting jobs in this country, issues related to how Canadian data is stored. And I want to make sure that in these conversations, all of which are important, that we're not conflating one with the other and vice versa. And sometimes we have a tendency in short spurts of questions to try and conflate one to the other. So for me, there are really three batches of things that we need to interrogate. One is obviously the issues related to labor in this country and in China, the issue of jobs in this country versus the export of jobs to others, and then the third is the issue of data. When it comes to the privacy protections of Canadians, this is something that has come up in previous conversations. I think there's been an acknowledgement that privacy laws in this country should apply and do apply to any vehicles that are imported. And I would observe and I would consider that under the agreement that we have to bring in the 49,000 Chinese EVs, that applies to them as well. And we should all, I think, take a moment to figure that out, because I think it does then address that particular piece of the conversation. But when we go to the issue of jobs in this country, and I would pose this to you, Professor McQuaig-Johnson, then to Mr. Shipley, the reality, unfortunately, is that vehicles made in this country have components that have come, or fortunately or otherwise, have come from different places, whether it's the U.S., whether it's China, so on and so forth. And those components go into Canadian-made vehicles. Canadian-made auto jobs right now are not growing. Is there an opportunity for us to work with Chinese manufacturers to create jobs in this country? And do you think that's something that we should be looking at as a government?
Before interrupting, time is up. Maybe can come back to some answers in the second round. And with that, we will proceed to MP Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes. Please go ahead, MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Madame la Présidente, je salue les témoins.
Madam Chair, I greet the witnesses who are here with me or with us today. The first question is to Madam Johnson. I'm happy to see you here with us today. First question, has the government... Hello? Hello? Interpretation? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I'll start over, Madam Chair, if I may. Ms. Ikwet-Johnson, the government has already decided to have a surcharge of 100%, that was in August 2024, on Chinese electric vehicles. So in your opinion, what has changed, concretely speaking, to the point that this opening has become acceptable to the point that we can have tens of thousands of Chinese vehicles coming to Canada?
Madam Chair, I wrote a brief to the government, to Department of Finance, leading into that 100% tariff, and nothing has changed substantively regarding the vehicles. So all of the reasons, there were multiple reasons why the government put on the tariff. Nothing has changed except that we needed to solve the canola problem, and China has now learned that it can use canola as leverage. And I fear that it's doing that in asking the Canadian government to support China in becoming a member of the CPTPP. You know, maybe if we don't do that, our canola will be at risk.
Merci. Le Premier ministre.
Thank you. Prime Minister Mark Carney decided in April 2025 that the greatest threat to our safety is China. And today we have a trade agreement with people who, according to the Prime Minister, are our greatest threat to our security. So in your opinion, what do you think about this, following your expertise, and what message does that send to our allies in other countries?
Always trade with China. The question is, how do you protect yourselves from what are, in many cases, obvious risks? And that's one of the things we're here talking about today, the range of risks that we face with this deal. You know, we've seen a lot of commentary on the risk of the agreement between the RCMP and the security police, the same security police who set up police stations across Canada, Chinese police stations, and in other countries as well. So there are a range of risks, and in taking China's approach of strategic partnership, that's their language, and having you know, their requirements for what they call a stable relationship with China, and being pragmatic, which is the Chinese language that they put into their readouts, Canada has gone, in my view, a bit too far in that. I thought we could have put something else on the table to relieve canola, something like investment in conventional energy, rather than EVs. I think EVs are too big a risk.
Je comprends. Et vous avez mentionné lors d'une présence au comité.
I understand you mentioned the presence of the Committee on Science and Research earlier on that Canada should not lose its resources to China. And in electric vehicles, don't you see that there is this kind of compromise that could happen, an agreement that could reproduce the error that you had denounced a few years back?
Madam Chair, I'm just looking for clarification. I am a big supporter of electric vehicles, and especially Canadian companies in that market. And I'm pleased to see we're going to have witnesses later on in this meeting on that subject. So I'm in favor of that. And to the extent that we can partner safely with people in China, that would be good. But I would raise a lot of big red flags about those partnerships, and we'd have to be very, very careful about how we do it.
Effectivement, je veux revenir sur les drapeaux rouges que vous...
I'll come back on the red flags that you're mentioning. I would like to hear from you about Canada's foreign policy right now. It seems like we just changed a bus driver, but we have the same policies. We don't seem to be taking into account human rights when we're setting up these economic partnerships. So what I want to hear from you is how can we say one thing a few months ago and do exactly the opposite later on?
Madam Chair, this is why it's really important to get back on track on forced labor. One of the things that we're asking for in a letter that we've sent to the Prime Minister is something that actually is in a block legislation, which is legislation that will have something like what's called legally a rebuttable presumption about the goods mined in high-risk areas. The Prime Minister has said that China has geographic areas that are higher risk and that we have to do more due diligence for those areas. The Prime Minister recognizes that very clearly. He himself, in his previous life, has actually done work on the issues related to forced labor and supported organizations on that subject. So I think he's had to compromise some of his own values, and that's regrettable.
Right.
And I think it's up to committees like this to help him with the risk management in this regard.
Merci. Madame McQuaid-Johnson, si je me rappelle bien, le Premier ministre...
Thank you, Madam. I remember that the Prime Minister was also the UN Special Envoy for Climate Change.
Questions in the second round. And with that, the first round comes to an end, and we will begin our second round of 5 minutes and 2.5 minutes. And we will start with MPD Reader for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. McCaig-Johnson, do you agree with both Clean Energy's statement and mine earlier in our study that forced labor should be unequivocally not a part of our supply chain? Yes or no? Can you explain to Canadians how forced labor is connected to EV production, backed by the Human Rights Watch 2024 report on forced labor specifically related to EVs?
In China, there have been mass transfers of Uyghurs to places of work that have been set up, usually out in very rural areas, where they are made to work to produce aluminum, and also working in coal mines. And both coal mines and aluminum are part of the inputs to EVs. And so it's through the aluminum that we see, and it's dozens of parts in the engine blocks and the wheels and internally in the car that we get this forced labor. And this regulation that has been passed forbids anybody to ask about that. And you know what? So what do you do in the face of that? Clearly, China doesn't like people asking about forced labor. And so they've just brought a regulation saying nobody can ask about it. And so what do? Oh, okay, well, we'll just accept that and we'll accept all of your products and we just won't ask any questions about forced labor.
That's why I'm asking you these questions today, because I do not accept not talking about it. Do you think that advocates like Clean Energy should reconsider statements like this is a pro-Canadian choice, considering that our Canadian auto workers are up against forced labor and our Canadian values?
Well, it's up against forced labor in China, and by way of this isn't just a handful of people. In 2024, it was 3.4 million transfers of Uyghurs into jobs like this in forced labor. And that's a large number of people. These are people working in slave conditions, and it's not just over there in China. In Brazil and in Hungary, and Ms. Duran mentioned the BYD plant in Hungary. I'm glad she did. She should look up Hungary and BYD and slave labor, because forced labor has been shown in the hundreds, 350 Chinese workers who have built the plant in Hungary, and now the authorities there are investigating. In Brazil, the government fined BYD $10 million because of the forced labor in that plant. But for BYD, that plans to have 2.4 billion in sales across South America, that's just the cost of doing business.
Would it not be better, in your opinion, for us to focus more on a trade deal with the U.S. and focus more on CUSMA for Canadian values instead of putting irritants like this EV trade deal in place?
My own view is that, yes, it would be better to focus on CUSMA, particularly with this Section 301 investigation. See what we can do to improve CUSMA, to get as much as we can under some new version of CUSMA, and set this aside for a year or 2 years, and then see if we want to come back to it. That would be my preference.
Thank you so much. Mr. Shipley, I have one question for you. Should national security considerations play a larger role in determining which countries Canada partners with in strategic sectors like EVs?
We absolutely need to take national security more seriously than we are in this country with respect to EVs and all connected cars. And I just reinforce the point that the threat from the PRC to Canada is real. Other experts have testified to the abundance of that. The threat posed by every single internet-connected car, and 47% of cars on Canada's road today are internet-connected, are growing and real.
So say thank you to our witnesses for coming today.
Thank you, MPD Ritter. And now we will go to MP McKelvey for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for Ms. McQuaig-Johnson. You have a long history in science administration and natural resources energy. I'm just wondering, we are on Science Committee, could you maybe speak to some of those investments that we should be making in science and technology, especially in the university sector, that can really help us to amplify our efforts in electric vehicle adoption and electrification. One thing that would happen through this is that there will be more uptake in electric vehicles. What do we need to do to make sure that our Canadian universities are really at the forefront of this technology and that we're developing that technology here in Canada?
We will not get the benefit of technology transfer from electric vehicles just being imported. I think we probably wouldn't get any even if we do joint ventures, although we can try. I think we should be putting a lot more resources into battery technology and other related components, the advanced manufacturing technology sector for vehicle manufacturing, and I would like to see the next budget be an innovation budget. And it could lay the foundation across all sectors of the economy and also look at bringing in innovation in social policy as well. If we had an innovation theme for the next budget, I think that would take advantage of the infrastructure initiatives being built, which I'm 100% behind. And and I think lay a strong foundation for other R&D across universities. We can always do more in commercialization. This is our one big flaw in our innovation environment. And so we should be looking at more opportunities for commercialization. And frankly, I do agree EVs are the cars of the future, which is why I started the EV technology roadmap in 2008. And we need to maximize the number of companies who can take advantage of that and grow with that and take advantage of the university research that can feed into that process.
Thank you. My next question is for Ms. Doran. We know, I think you mentioned that there's 30% sales are EV right now. You anticipate it being 40% by 2030. I think internationally we're seeing a big uptake. Is it fair to say that this trend of EV adoption is going to continue and there's considerable opportunities that can be seized here?
Yes, it's our opinion, looking at the kind of global transportation market, that the direction towards electrification is pretty undeniable. And I think maybe just to speak to the complexity of the issues this committee is trying to address, I think it's important to realize that there's companies like Volvo that have a parent company, Geely, that's a Chinese company. We have, as already mentioned, Tesla that's previously manufactured in China. General Motors is sourcing cattle batteries from China for Chevy Bolts. Stellantis has taken a stake in Leap Motor. There's a lot of kind of new partnerships emerging around the world. And I think because Canada has so many of the critical minerals that will feed into the battery supply chains, it's important for us to think about our opportunities in the auto sector is really much broader than final manufacturing, and looking for opportunities along the supply chain where we can insert our innovation, our materials, and ensure we're getting more value add kind of along that supply chain. And really now is the time to fit into some of those decisions and supply chains that are forming globally.
So on that, do you have estimates around jobs that as we transition into EV, we could look forward to having around critical minerals, supply chains, batteries, vehicles? And I know you're in the clean energy, so clean energy and infrastructure. Like, do we know what the opportunity is here?
So I think I'll say we did do a study, but it dates back to 2022, looking at Canada's EV battery supply chain opportunity. And said at the time, out of kind of 4 scenarios, Canada was looking at up to a $50 billion opportunity if it made the right choices. For a while, we actually got so many investments into Canada, the number of gigafactories, et cetera, we went above some of our estimates. Now with pullback from the US, those figures have changed. So I would be reluctant to say that I think that stat is specifically relevant today, but it maybe speaks to how quickly the global market is changing and how fast we need to move to seize some of those opportunities. And the opportunities are very real.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up for MP McKelvey. If you can just quickly wind up. Yeah.
That's fine. I'm happy to look at anything I can provide the committee in addition to my remarks.
Okay. Thank you.
With that, we will proceed to MP Blanchet-Juncker for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'll continue with Ms. Quaig-Johnson. So when the government questions the proof of forced labor, doesn't it show that there is a disconnect between the broader discourse about human rights? I also think about the work that the Prime Minister has done to strengthen economic partnership with some authoritarian regimes.
The Prime Minister ultimately made clear that he recognizes that there's forced labor in China, and forced labor in particular in certain regions of China. Everyone knows that means Xinjiang, but the Chinese have also sent tens of thousands of Uyghurs to other parts of China to work in factories like Nike and others, which is really implicating Western companies in the forced labor, just as it would implicate Canadians. If we buy electric vehicles that we know pretty confidently have forced labor in the aluminum in the cars. It implicates us personally in that. And I think that would be really regrettable if we had those driving around our streets everywhere.
Madame McQuaig-Johnson, ma question est beaucoup plus précise.
Well, my question is more precise. Do you think that the commercial interests of the government supersede the principles that Canada claims to defend?
Government at this time is trying its best to diversify to other countries in the world, diversify our trade. I support that. But I don't think that should come at the expense of human rights. And I don't think it needs to. I think we can make choices that reflect our values as Canadians. And the Prime Minister and ministers have gone abroad and say that we have a values-based, pragmatic foreign policy. And what countries like China hear when we say values-based, pragmatic foreign policy is they hear pragmatic and we'll just roll over whenever they tell us that they want us to do something. And it seems that we may, from time to time, be doing that. And I think that's, personally, as somebody who's focused her career on public policy, I think that's terrible and not necessary. I think we can have our values.
Thank you. Time is up for MP Blanchet-Juncker. And now we will have 3 minutes for MP Ho, and then 3 minutes for MP Noor Mohammed, and then we will end this panel. MP Ho. Because I want to keep some time in the end, like from the second panel and first panel for some scheduling purposes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Ms. McQuaig-Johnson, you warned that Chinese-made EVs have the ability to survey on Canadians through their software. And earlier this month, I asked the Canada's Privacy Commissioner if he was ever consulted by the Liberal government on the subject of Chinese or foreign-made EVs. And he said that his department was never consulted. Given those risks, do you believe the Liberal government showed a lack of judgment by allowing Chinese-made EVs into the Canadian market without clear safeguards?
I believe that there should have been wide consultation on this. And we're seeing now the result that there hadn't been. And so we're trying to ring fence some of these risks. And, you know, when you talk about privacy and data, that's a big risk. EVs driving onto military bases is another risk. Poland, Israel have banned it. But I would make the point, because several people have talked at this meeting about components. The UK has banned any vehicle going onto military bases that have components from China, not just Chinese EVs, but components in another type of car. And I would include not just military bases, CSIS, CSE, I would include Global Affairs Canada and some other departments.
My next question is for Mr. Shipley. You warned that connected vehicles may function like rolling surveillance platforms. We've seen countries like Poland, U.S., Israel place restrictions on the use and import of Chinese-made EVs, and many other countries are now following suit. What kinds of personal data could Chinese-made EVs potentially collect, transmit, or expose without the driver realizing it? And did the Liberal government fail to understand these risks?
Well, I think it's been abundantly clear in my submission. You can see an example of a Tesla, which was parked in someone's garage, has cameras on 24/7. That individual actually walked in front of the camera unclothed and was captured, and then that video was traded among employees for a laugh. So, I mean, we've already seen real examples of the rolling cameras, the microphones inside, the other examples about the geolocation data and other things. I mean, they are a data collection platform, but I just want to reinforce China's nation state hacking teams will hack Ford, GM, Tesla, and others as well, if they are not in there now doing the exact same thing, because it makes sense to gather this kind of data. So if we don't secure all connected cars, closing the door on China does not close China's hacking team out.
Great, thank you. And I'll use my last 15 seconds to bring up potentially extending. You asked me to bring it up at the end, so because we've lost one witness in the second hour due to some unforeseen circumstances, and if it's the will of the committee or through you, Chair, to allow Ms. McQuaig Johnson to stay for the second hour as well.
Okay, so I need to get some scheduling things resolved, so I want to keep some time. So I think like those opening remarks, 5 minutes can be used towards scheduling purposes. Like sometimes people cancel, they have some other commitments, so we don't have control. Usually like the witnesses stay for an hour, but I will leave it up to the committee members what would be their will. No.
Can we go to vote?
We can have a vote on this, see if we could have Ms. McQuaig Johnson stay.
Usually, like, we have witnesses for an hour, and because we have to do some scheduling business also in the end. So those opening 5 minutes will be used towards that because I need to have some answers from the members of the committee in order to schedule, because this coming Monday is the last meeting of the witnesses for this study. So I need to get some direction from the committee members. So we need to use some time. We will be using that time. Like, I think I need some 10 minutes to get some answers.
Ms. McQuaig Johnson doesn't have to provide an opening statement again.
We could, the second hour can be in your
we're not.
We have to provide, because we have three witnesses, like as I see, we have three witnesses, so it will not be fair to ask someone. I think maybe we should pose the question to all of the witnesses, or like usually the practice is that they leave after 1 hour and we have the witnesses of the second hour, and we have many meetings where we have dealt with only two witnesses.
They can all stay then, sure.
They can all
We have dealt with many meetings where we only have two witnesses. So that's not something new that we only have to deal with two witnesses. Like the witness just cancelled in the morning, so there was no way that we could schedule the third witness for this study.
I'd like to move a vote on this.
Okay.
So I mean, I'd like my 3 minutes to me. I want to make sure I
No,
don't
no,
lose
we
my
will
3
have your
minutes.
3
though, 'cause
minutes.
I
Yeah,
still have-
no, we will. Yeah, no, we had to stop the clock. So we will have 3 minutes before we end this panel. So we are eating into the next panel's time. Sorry, yes, MP Noor.
If Professor McQuaig Johnson is still here, why don't we take a minute, try and resolve this amongst ourselves to see how best to do it in the break? Because I want to make sure we hear from the other witnesses whose time is now being going. I recognize my colleague may want more time with the professor, but I suspect we're probably better to solve it in an actual conversation, try and do it like this. But
I like to just have a vote, and then we could deal with it. And from conversations, it looks like some of the witnesses are willing to stay for the second hour. Again, they're not providing opening statements again, so it would not throw the schedule off.
Okay, so we can take a vote. I will ask the clerk to please take the vote. So. Okay, so just to clarify, 1 second, just let me finish. Just let me finish. So can you, MP Ho, can you be clear on what you are saying for the vote? Are you asking just one person to stay on, or you are asking all the three witnesses to stay on?
I'd like to call a vote to allow the first hour witnesses to stay for the second hour, should their schedules permit. Thank you.
Yeah. The clerk to please take the vote. So no, because I need instructions, like because the last meeting of the witnesses is on Monday, and I need to get direction. So I have to keep a few minutes in the end for the scheduling purposes. So we will go when we start the second panel, we will see how many rounds of questioning we can do. Thank you. So, MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Madame la Présidente, merci. Juste une précision.
Thank you, Chair. Do we need a motion to do this action? Maybe the clerk can tell us, or maybe we just need an agreement among the members. Do we need a motion for this?
So MP Ho has moved a motion. If you want, I can ask the clerk to read it again, or MP Ho can repeat it again.
Simplement, Madame la Présidente, j'aimerais suivre.
Madam Chair, I just want to follow the procedure. We need the motion in the 2 official languages, so maybe we'll need to suspend the committee meeting time for us to get the translated motion. That would be appreciated.
The member to move a motion, and we have interpretation. So if you want, I can ask MP Ho to repeat the motion again.
Madame la Présidente, comme vous
Madam
connaissez.
Chair, as you know the procedure to receive a motion, we need to receive it in the 2 official languages, so I would appreciate that the procedure be respected.
Give me a minute to consult the clerk and to see. We are just eating up into the next panel's time. Thank you. Can I have the attention of all the members? Clerk would like to explain about the rule in regards to the notice of motion and the prerogative of the members in moving a motion. Over to the clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, it's the prerogative of a member to move a motion from the floor. We don't need, we only need to have it in both official languages for a notice of motion put 48 hours before time. But of course, under the topic of consideration, there's no notice required, and a member can move a motion from the floor. Thank you.
Okay, so we will take the vote. Thank you.
Mr. Noor Mohamed.
No.
Monsieur Deschenteriot.
No.
Ms. McKelvey.
No.
Ms. Earl.
No.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Ho, sorry.
Yes.
Ms. De Ridder.
Yes.
Mr. Mahal.
Yes, please.
Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca.
Contre.
5 nays, 4 yeas. 5 yeas, 4 nays. 5 nays, 4 yeas. So the motion is defeated.
So the motion is defeated. And we will end this panel with MP Noor Mohammed for 3 minutes. MP Noor Mohammed, please go ahead.
It feels like so long ago, but I just want to go back to where we were. You know, I want to go back to this conversation about data, Professor McQuaig-Johnson and Professor Shipley, or Mr. Shipley, about the concerns that Canadians should have about data storage writ large. We've talked about EVs. Professor, should we be concerned about other devices in our homes, other smart devices in our homes?
I would say not as much as EVs.
You wouldn't be concerned about a device in your home that's capturing video 24/7?
Well, you know, some people would be. For example, because of the threats that have been made against me, I've had cameras installed outside and inside my home, and I've gone to the trouble of checking. I chose TELUS because I was able to verify that that equipment is made in Texas, not in China.
So you would have been concerned then about the deal that Prime Minister Harper signed between Huawei and the Chinese government, and TELUS, and that he presided over that. You would be concerned. You would have been concerned.
I
about
would
that.
have been. Yes.
Right. Okay.
I was a big advocate of not having Huawei in our 5G.
So, you know, you went to that effort to make sure that you did not have Chinese equipment as part of your home surveillance devices. should Canadians then not be concerned about those types of things as well, whether it's a scale or whether it's like the Amazon Fire Stick that my colleague opposite tried to give to the witness or to the member of parliament that you were concerned about earlier? I mean, these are all devices made in China that are in our homes collecting data all the time.
That's true, but a vehicle moves and can be used as a weapon. When your phone is charging in an electric vehicle, the ones from China download the contents of your phone, even when the car is turned off.
But
so
all
that's
vehicles, but
all of the contents.
But to be
of your
fair,
phone.
my vehicle not made in China also downloads that information from my phone.
Right.
But that can happen on the cloud all the time, does it not?
Citizen Lab has done a study of Baidu software from China. There's virtually no privacy protection in that. And as we know, Section 7 of the National Intelligence Act of China requires citizens and organizations to spy on behalf of the Chinese state.
Now, the U.S. Cloud Act gives the U.S. government certain provisions and certain protections, certain access to data that is held on U.S. servers. That includes data of Canadian citizens, which is captured on all manner of devices, including, for example, certain devices that may be made in China, but which are owned by U.S. companies and which are powered by U.S. businesses. Does that not also concern you?
It doesn't as much as China, because of the malign intent that China has shown multiple times against Canadians and has shown by the Citizen Lab multiple reports.
But this is where I'm confused. You're concerned about EVs, but not about the devices that we have in our homes that our kids are exposed to.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up.
Okay.
But I was concerned.
Time is up for MP Noor Mohammed. And with that, this panel comes to an end. I really want to thank all the three witnesses for appearing before the committee and providing their important testimonies. So with that, we will suspend the meeting so that the witnesses for the second hour can take their seats. So thanks for appearing, and the meeting is suspended.
Thank you, Beth.
Welcome back to everybody. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and as well as the members. Please keep the noise level low. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And with that, I would like to welcome our two witnesses for this panel. We are joined by Dr. Ryan Ahmed, Assistant Professor, and also we are joined by Moitaz Muhammad, Associate Professor. Both are joining us by video conference. Welcome to this committee. Thanks for appearing. Both of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will go into round of questioning. So I will ask Dr. Ahmed to please start. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
All right. Thank you. So, Chair and honorable members, thank you for the invitation. My name is Dr. Ryan Ahmed. I'm an assistant professor of mechanical engineering at McMaster University and the Deputy Director of the Center for Mechatronics and Hybrid Technologies. My research focuses on artificial intelligence and electric vehicle batteries. I held engineering roles at General Motors, at Samsung, and Stellantis, working on electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles in both US and Canada. And I'm a professional engineer in Ontario. I would like to leave the committee with 3 observations and followed by 3 recommendations. The first observation is the technology gap is widening. There is a growing gap between Chinese and North American EV manufacturers, driven primarily by vertical integration. Chinese firms such as BYD manufacture roughly 75 to 80% of their vehicle content in-house, compared to about 40% for Tesla and 20 to 30% for traditional OEMs like General Motors and Ford. Having worked on both sides at Samsung on the supplier side and also at GM on the OEM side, I can tell the committee that the tier 1, tier 2 supplier has a built-in limitation. Each supplier protects their own know-how and optimizes their own subsystem, and there is a minimal optimization that happen on the vehicle level. Without closing that integration gap, a tariff simply protects a shrinking share of the value chain. My second observation is Canada has made a generational bet into a softening market. Canada has committed $32 billion to electric vehicles and battery manufacturing. The market is softening, with EV sales declining and major automakers scaling back programs. We are commissioning world-scale capacity into a softening market. The 49,000 vehicle arrangement with China must be evaluated into that context. Observation 3 is that the Canada-China arrangement can be constructive, but only if it's paired with conditions on science, research, and domestic value added. If pre-built Chinese vehicles are sold directly into Canada, they obviously improve affordability, but add little Canadian engineering or IP. If instead it is tied to joint research with Canadian universities, local critical mineral sourcing, and of course, enforceable data security requirements, the agreement can accelerate rather than displace Canada's EV sector. My 3 recommendations are as follows. First is condition quota allocations on a minimum threshold of Canadian engineering content and critical mineral inputs, lithium, nickel, and cobalt. Second is to require that connected vehicle data from imported EVs on Canadian roads to be stored, processed, and audited under Canadian jurisdictions. And third is direct federal research funding to a national battery and vehicle software programs that pairs universities such as McMaster University, Waterloo, and Polytechnique Montreal with Canadian automakers and suppliers. So the next generation of EV platforms is co-engineered in Canada, not just simply assembled or sold here. Canada is not behind on minerals, talent, or ambition. We are behind on integrated execution. Handled carefully, this agreement is an opportunity to correct that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I welcome the committee's questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for your opening remarks. You might have taught my son because he's a mechanical engineer graduate from McMaster University. So if you were there, he graduated in 23. So now I will go to Mr. Mohammed for 5 minutes. Mr. Mohammed, please go ahead.
Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Mu'taz Mohammed. I'm Associate Professor in the Department of Civil Engineering at McMaster University and Director of the McMaster Institute for Transportation and Logistics. My research focuses on transportation electrification, including bus transit electrification and personal vehicles. I have been researching how Canadians perceive, evaluate, and decide whether to adopt electric vehicles and what infrastructure and cost conditions shape those decisions. I have over 54 peer-reviewed publications, and my work has appeared in Nature Communications, Nature Scientific Reports, and leading transportation journals. My research has been funded by Natural Resources Canada, Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, and Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. And I will use my time to present evidence from my research on 4 interconnected dimensions of electric vehicle adoption in Canada. First, the environmental benefits. In a comprehensive evidence-based review, my team synthesized findings from over 4,700 different studies. We have found that electric vehicle adoption consistently produces a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and air pollutants relative to conventional internal combustion engine. However, the magnitude of that benefit is directly tied to the emissions intensity of the electricity grid used to charge electric vehicles. Canada's electricity grid is among the cleanest in the world, which places Canada in a very strong position to realize environmental gains. Second is the vehicle utility. Understanding why adoption still lags despite the strong environmental case is a central question that my research addresses. Our data drawn from a national survey of approximately 20,000 households across every province and territory in Canada consistently show that the vast majority of Canadians drive well within the range capability of modern electric vehicles. Yet the gap between perceived and actual utility remains one of the most persistent findings in our work. Third, perception and adoption gap. Our research found that attitude, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control are among the primary determinants of electric vehicle adoption intention. However, positive adoption intention do not reliably translate into actual behavior decision. We also found that many respondents reported being unaware of charging stations near their home, yet when we cross-referenced their postal code with actual infrastructure data, charging stations were frequently present nearby. Fourth is cost sensitivity. Across multiple studies, purchase price emerges as the single most consistent barrier for Canadians who have not yet adopted an electric vehicle, even among those who acknowledge the long-term fuel saving. Upfront cost consistently outweighs life cycle cost reasoning in consumer decision-making behavior. The picture is more clear when the transaction type is considered. Households replacing a primary electric vehicle are more sensitive to battery electric vehicle operating cost, while households who are adding a second vehicle are more sensitive to conventional vehicle operating costs. The evidence from my research points consistently to a picture in which environmental cases for electric vehicle adoption in Canada is very strong. The practical utility of electric vehicles for Canadian drivers is frequently underestimated, and the relationship between infrastructure and adoption is mediated in many ways by perception. However, cost sensitivity at the point of purchase is a significant constraint for Canadians. The finding points to one overarching conclusion: access to lower cost electric vehicle will increase adoption, particularly among the segment of Canadian population that are currently on the margin of decision. Greater availability of lower priced electric vehicles in the Canadian market will expand the market incrementally and open the door to a segment of Canadian that current price points have kept out. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed, for your opening remarks. And with that, we will now proceed with our first round of questioning of 6 minutes each. And we will begin with MP Mahal for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Here with us. I want to start with, and any one of you can start first. I think I would want to have opinion from both of you guys. Canada is currently investing tens of billions of dollars in domestic EV and battery manufacturing to build an industry and secure jobs. At the same time, the government is opening the market to a heavily subsidized Chinese EV import. Is there a contradiction between those two objectives and what we are missing? So anyone can start.
Okay, Madam Chair, I will gently point out to my title, Dr. Mohammed. But regarding the question, I think from an adoption perception, and this is the core of my studies and the core of my findings, is mainly user is concerned not about the supply chain, not about the whereabout of making the vehicle. The consumer is concerned about the reliability of the vehicle, the maintenance, predictive maintenance of the vehicle, and most importantly, at the point of purchase is the purchase price.
Thank you. So if Mr. Ahmed can answer.
Yes. So the way you look at it is right now there is a softening market specifically for EVs. And the reason is, first, all the early adopters of electric vehicles have pretty much saturated, and kind of the consumers are looking for affordable next generation electric vehicles. Also, of course, the federal as well incentives have disappeared as well. So that has impacted the market too. So my recommendation, as I mentioned to the committee, my third recommendation is if we enable those Chinese vehicles to be imported or kind of sold as well into the Canadian market, it's going to be associated with conditions when it comes to the data privacy, data security, and also when it comes to having a threshold on engineering, Canadian engineering content specifically on those vehicles. It's not just an open market specifically for Chinese vehicles without any conditions.
And how do you see it? You mentioned in your opening statement, as well as in this previous question, that Canadian government is investing billions of dollars in a market that is softening. How do you think this Chinese import EVs is going to impact on that market that is already softening?
Yeah, it will definitely have an impact on the market. From a technology standpoint, and I've seen it as well working in the industry, the Chinese EVs, they compete significantly when it comes to cost. So they can offer a lot more features to the per dollar as compared to North American vehicles. And for example, a Seagull electric vehicle, BYD, the starting price point with significantly more features compared to North American vehicles is at around $22,000. So it will definitely have an impact. So my recommendation is, of course, having cheaper, I would say, electric vehicles available in the market. That will be beneficial for consumers, but we can't just open it without any conditions on it, because when it comes to having kind of owning Canadian IPs and also having universities as well being involved too, that will open as well the market as well to us. But so to answer your question, yes, it will definitely have an impact.
Thank you.
Specifically on the market. Yes.
Thank you. Chinese EV firms benefit from significant Chinese Communist Party support and operate under a different economic model. Can Canadian firms realistically compete on a level playing ground under those conditions, in your opinion, Dr. Ahmed?
Yeah. So, well, it's a good question. So my recommendation is the model of having an OEM and the supplier model as we speak right now is quite, it's not efficient. For example, the life cycle for an electric vehicle for an average North American like GM and Ford is around 5 to 6 years, while for BYD, it's between 18 to 24 months. So the having a vertical integration, basically here within the North American manufacturer, is required to be able to compete with the Chinese vehicles at the moment. So it is doable, but basically it requires kind of significant investments, I would say, from OEMs and suppliers, and of course for the government too.
From credible concerns about forced labor in upstream supply chains, particularly involving Uyghur labor in China, in your view, can a supply chain linked to those practices be considered environmentally or ethically sustainable, given the standards that we keep in Canada? Dr. Ahmed.
Well, yeah. So, well, I actually prefer to stay in the technical, aspect. Again, I don't have a full picture of what is happening on the side, when it comes to labor laws and so on. So I prefer to stay in the technical, basically, aspect. I provide my engineering expertise.
Okay. If Canada prioritizes lower cost import and
20 seconds left.
Does that come at an expense of long-term supply chain resilience and sustainability? Dr. Ahmed, quick answer.
Yeah. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? Sorry, I'm apologize.
Time is up, I guess.
We will now proceed to MP Deschamps-Tarion for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is to Dr. Mohammed. In your statement, you mentioned research that you're making on factors that lead to someone to decide to buy an electric vehicle. You said that they take into account about 200 variables. So in your expertise, how does the arrangement that we have with China for the limited importation of some Chinese electric vehicles, how will that influence the buyer to make the decision to buy an electric vehicle?
So thank you for the question. The most important aspect that actually motivates or triggers the market is the purchase price at the point of purchase. And once you go into from buying the vehicle at the first time, you start developing the so-called the habitual behavior. So you immediately alleviate your range anxiety. You don't think about range anxiety. You don't think about buying like a bigger battery. So purchase price is kind of a critical point for you to join the EV market. And what we have observed from our studies that the so-called in science, we coin this term as the willingness to analysis. So the willingness to evaluate in the era of incentives or the era of fuel savings, especially when the fuel price will spike up compared to electricity prices, we found consistently that every dollar reduction in the gap between battery electric vehicle and internal consumption Egypt is evaluated by users with $0.4. So they actually see, if you reduce the gap in price, they see added utility and they receive more incentives actually to go into the electric vehicle market. And we have also seen this when people are considering the pre-owned electric vehicle market. So the pre-owned electric vehicle market is also growing. However, the same conclusions that we have found on the new vehicles, we can actually echo most of it when it comes into the pre-owned vehicle. So if you are a first-time EV, sorry.
Oh, you can finish your sentence.
If you are a first-time EV buyer, purchase price is the Achilles heel.
Et donc, je comprends que l'importation donc de véhicules.
So I understand that the importation of Chinese vehicles would have a positive impact on the amount of EVs on our roads. In your research, you also mentioned that in some publications there is an environmental impact on the use of EVs. It would help have a road network that will help us reach our climate goals faster. So I want to hear your opinion about that. How does that help us achieve our climate goals?
Madam Chair, so thank you for the question. Let me start with the environmental gains because I strongly believe, and also evidence from the research point out very clearly to the competitiveness edge of Canada when it comes into clean electricity production. And I'm speaking about the national average, and we have very superior provinces in Canada that produces pretty much near zero greenhouse gas emission for each kilowatt hour electricity produced in their grid. So professional capacity, I can state that environmental gains from electric vehicles in Canada are significant compared to other places, including the United States. And increasing the market adoption of electric vehicles or increasing the adoption of electric vehicles in Canada will substantially reduce the transportation sector greenhouse gas emission. As per the second point of the question.
Désolé, le temps file et j'ai deux autres.
Time is running out, and I have two other questions that I would love to ask. In your research, well, I represent a rural district, and so in your variables that you identified, did you notice a notable difference in rural and urban areas? And if that's the case, what will be the challenges in the rural areas adopting EVs, and what can we do about that?
Thank you for the question. I will make it very brief. Rural versus urban. Urban, they drive less vehicle kilometer traveled on a daily basis. Rural, they drive more kilometers compared to urban settings. So infrastructure intensity as it relates to access to charging points is significantly important in rural area, especially in rural areas in northern territories and in relatively colder climate, as the battery range will be limited during cold weather.
Et au niveau de la recherche, donc vous avez tous les deux mentionné.
And with research, you both mentioned that you're working in research. So are there priority areas where we have to invest in research when we're talking about EVs? Dr. Ahmed, you mentioned that as a third recommendation. So in what areas should we prioritize investing for research in EVs? Dr. Ahmed?
So a few areas. First is when it comes to the entire powertrain integration. So battery pack, electric motors, DC-DC converters, all of these units as an integrated basically platform. This is where China has an edge, I would say, compared to North American manufacturers. There's another area as well, which is into second life, which is after these electric vehicles batteries have aged. Now we need to take these battery packs and repurpose them so they still have enough life to be used for a stationary application. So that's another key research area as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Time is up for MP de Ontario, and now we will go to MP Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes. Please go ahead, MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Première question va être pour Monsieur Mohamed. Les véhicules.
First question to Mr. Mohamed. EVs collect sensitive data. Is it the users who control that data, or is it the builders who control the data?
I don't have technical capacity to answer this question. I can answer from my own personal experience as a driver of an electric vehicle that there is an option to opt out from data sharing once you operate. However, I don't know if this option is being honored by the manufacturer or the data is being collected regardless of my choice.
Que le prix est un facteur déterminant pour la.
You said the price is a determining factor in the purchase of an EV, and the government did the contrary. It suspended its incentives for the purchase of EVs in 2025, and with political pressure, it was reinstated in 2026, and it would be financed temporarily and in a regressive way. That is, the amount will be smaller and smaller. Are we not giving the markets a signal that there would be instability, at least in the medium term, and that the incentives that you mentioned are not being taken into account?
I would agree that the change of the incentive package and the discontinuation of incentives and then restating the incentive brought some sensitivity and uncertainty in the market. I cannot stress the importance of incentives because they offer an alternative pathway to reduce the cost of the vehicle significantly. In 2015, I think this was the most generous incentive era, and we saw early adopters getting into EV. However, what we are lacking here in incentives is related to pre-owned electric vehicle incentives, and also in some provinces in Canada, restructuring incentives based on the price of the vehicle and based on the household income. In short, incentives are one of the great tools to motivate electric vehicle adoptions in any market.
J'aimerais vous entendre notamment sur la performance du Québec.
I'd like to hear what you think about the Quebec's performance. Quebec has 50% of the fleet across the country. We know that we were pioneers with respect to incentives to buy EVs. Do you think that beyond the financial aspect, were there other things that could explain why Quebec has many more EVs than the rest of Canada, considering its small geographical area compared to the rest of Canada?
Quebec is a very pioneer and very useful case study to dig deep and understand and learn from it into the EV landscape. As I noted in my opening remarks, we have also what we call attitudinal and psychological factors that actually impact the EV adoption. One very strong is the social norm. So educational and awareness campaign to educate end users on the benefits of electric vehicles, the environmental benefits, as well as the life cycle cost benefits are significantly important. Infrastructure intensity, what we have observed from our data, that a lot of people, they are not aware of the infrastructure. They don't see the charging stations because they don't use it, and their perception that there are not enough charging stations. And the peer pressure that you see when you see a lot of EVs in the road, actually, this is an open invitation for other users to attend. So aside from the cost, I will say infrastructure in terms of charging infrastructure, especially in multi-unit residential building. Second one, education and awareness. Both of them will motivate the market and stability in the incentive program.
Merci. Vous parlez d'infrastructures, de normes sociales. Vous savez
Thank
que
you. You've talked about infrastructure and social norms. You know that we have bought a pipeline and it cost about $34 billion, and that oil is to be exported, and it's not even for local consumption. So I'm trying to understand, with your opinion, of course, and with your expertise, we have money to buy a different source of energy like oil, but we don't have money to invest in infrastructure for new technologies that would reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So what do you say about this contradictory message that is sent?
So, given my limited expertise in the oil and gas industry, I can comment on the electric vehicle infrastructure. One of the untapped markets when it comes into EV consumers is the multi-unit residential building, because they don't have point of access for slow charging overnight, and the condominium agreements in many situations and in many cases is not updated to reflect a high percentage of electric vehicle buyers. So if we are looking into electric vehicle infrastructure, I will say there is still a gap, and it's the so-called the chicken and egg situation. You provide the infrastructure, you provide the visibility, and you hope that this will trigger users to actually utilize the infrastructure. It's the same as most of the fundamental services that we interact with on a daily basis. But if I comment on the EV infrastructure, I will echo the statement that there is a need to invest on electric vehicle infrastructure, especially when it comes into low-income neighborhoods as well as multi-unit residential building, just to make sure that there is a lens of equity and inclusion when it comes into the EV landscape.
Thank you. Merci. Time is up for MP Blanchet-Juncker. And now, before we end this panel, we will have 3.5 minutes for Mr. Holman, 3.5 minutes for MP Hertel, and then 1.5 minutes for MP Blanchet-Juncker. So we will begin with MP Holman for 3.5 minutes. Yes, MP Blanchet-Juncker.
Madame la Présidente, juste pour information.
Madam Chair, for information, is there any way to prolong the committee session instead of interrupting shortening the speaking time of MPs and witnesses?
Like we have for 2 hours, the committee, and we will have to end it at 1 o'clock, and we need to discuss about our scheduling. So I mentioned in the beginning that we will have to do that scheduling part today because we need some instructions in order to schedule the further meetings.
Okay. Donc, ma question pour vous, est-ce que nous avons les ressources?
The question is this: do we have the resources available to extend the committee time?
The availability of the members and about the resources also, we will have to get it checked. But as I indicated in the beginning, we will schedule some time. Now we are like just eating up into that time. We need 10 minutes for the scheduling purposes. So I'll go to MP Holman for 3.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses that are here attending the Science and Research Committee today. Dr. Ahmed, you worked across both industry and research in electric and autonomous vehicles. From your perspective, how important is it for Canada to maintain domestic engineering, manufacturing, and supply chain capacity in the EV sector?
I believe it is absolutely critical at the moment, and watching and kind of seeing the industry and also on the research side, we have world-class talent when it comes to battery pack integration, knowledge in battery management systems, and to stay competitive, as I mentioned early on, our issue is when it comes to the entire vehicle integration. So integrating the battery pack with electric motors, inverters, and optimizing the system as a whole. And I see there is, when it comes to talent, we have incredible talent. For example, McMaster team won the Battery Workforce Challenge, which is a North American competition that was last year for the second year out of 12 North American, including US and Canada. So we have exceptional teams here. The issue is when it comes to integrated execution.
If a country relies more heavily on imported EVs rather than domestic production, what are the risks in terms of loss of technical expertise, innovation capacity, and long-term competitiveness?
Yeah, My recommendation was to not open the entire market specifically for like Chinese vehicles as an example, but to have a conditional quota in there. So think of it as it's similar to what, for example, China did with Tesla. So back in 2019, they allowed Tesla to open a gigafactory, for example, in China. So they gave them cheap credit, cheap loans, and they allowed them to actually invest in there, but on a condition that there is a Canadian supplier that there is a Chinese supplier that need to be involved in there. So I see this as an opportunity as well for Canada in the similar fashion, not to just open the market specifically and just allow vehicles to be sold here, because of course that would have a significant impact on our workers, and we were not going to gain much out of it. The point is, if we open that, there need to be a condition on the engineering content and IP specifically for Canadians, and to have suppliers, Canadian suppliers that are be involved in there. And that's simply my recommendation to the committee.
We've heard proposals around importing partially assembled vehicles or knockdown kits. From an engineering and manufacturing standpoint, do these approaches build meaningful domestic capability, or do they risk limiting Canada's role to final stage assembly?
Yeah, just importing just vehicles or doing just bare minimum assembly, there won't be a lot of, I'd say, IP or knowledge gained specifically for Canadians. So that's why, again, my recommendation was to have suppliers, Canadian suppliers being involved in there. There is a condition on critical minerals, on suppliers that are being involved in the assembly of those vehicles. And any company that doesn't meet that minimum requirement basically will be excluded from that quota, basically. That was my recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Now we will proceed to MP Hertel for 3.5 minutes. Please go ahead, and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to be here. Dr. Ahmed, wondering if you had finished your comments in response to MP DeChenterio's question earlier, if you need another moment to finish that response.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay.
That was all my response, yeah.
Okay. So we know that the number of new EVs sold around the world have only been increasing over the last few years. Nearly 24% of new cars sold in 2024 worldwide were EVs. So how does this increase in EVs worldwide improve opportunities for the Canadian auto sector?
And that question for me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, I see the future as electric autonomous, right? So we see electric vehicles are, from a cost standpoint, from efficiency standpoint, are superior to internal combustion engine vehicles. Of course, right now there is a bit of a softening demand, specifically because, first of all, customer acceptance. It takes a long time for customers to accept changing from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric and autonomous vehicles. That's one. Of course, having the incentives, the $12,000 incentive being removed and then reinstated back, that has an impact as well. And also the price point, which is what Dr. Mohammed mentioned early on. An electric vehicle at 30% premium compared to conventional vehicles is a roadblock for so many. And I would see basically having these incentives, having also access to affordable electric vehicles as well, that will expand the market quite significantly. And of course, to answer your question specifically, electric vehicles, we see them as incredible opportunities for Canada and Canadians.
Thank you. And Dr. Mohammed, your question. The International Energy Agency has predicted that the share of electric cars in overall car sales is set to exceed 40% in 2030. Is it fair to say that this is not experimentation? This is where the market and the money is going?
I will say yes, short answer. Long answer will say that there will be some significant deviation within different countries. This is more of a global prediction. But when you consider country by country specific, you will have some leading countries, China, Scandinavian countries, and then Europe, and then you will go into the US and Canada. But future, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned, future is electric, future is autonomous, future is affordability as well.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. And with that, time comes to an end for MP Hertel. And we will end this panel with MP Blanche Janka for 1.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Madame la Présidente, chers députés, pouvez-vous nous informer pour la location?
Can you inform us about the available resources? Or do we have the resources to extend the time?
OK.
No.
On n'a pas de réponse? On n'a pas de...
Needs to answer us.
We don't have an answer as yet.
OK.
Okay.
D'accord. Ce serait possible pour les prochaines...
Okay, for next time, would it be possible, Madam Chair, to verify if we could extend the committee instead of making a decision before informing us?
Do that. It depends, we have to take decision based on every committee meeting, what agenda we have. So please go ahead with your time.
Non, mais vous comprenez, Madame la Présidente, moi je perds du temps de parole, c'est mon privilège.
But you understand that I'm losing time, speaking time, and it's my parliamentary privilege. So for future calendars, we could plan for that in subcommittee meetings.
We try to do subcommittee meetings whenever there is a chance available, but at times we need some answers for our scheduling purposes, so we have to do it. Setting up the agenda is a chair's prerogative, and whenever we need some answers to schedule further meetings, we have to do that.
Right.
And we have done it in the past, and at times we have to do it. We generally don't do it, but sometimes when we need that, we have to do it.
Right. Sauf que, Madame la Présidente, pour votre information, c'est...
Madam Chair, for your information, you have never convened a subcommittee meeting since you took the chair in this parliament. So shortening our time, you know that our time is precious, and shortening our time for calendar, to plan our calendar, I don't think that is fair.
Okay, I'll take your point, and we will look into what we can do. And with that, your time is up, and we will have to end this meeting.
Est-ce que vous pouvez vous informer auprès du greffier si nous avons la réponse des...
Could you check with the clerk if we have the resources available?
We have some resources available, but it will be the will of the committee members whether they want to adjourn the meeting or suspend the meeting. So it will be up to the members to do that. We are just eating up into the time which we need to do for the scheduling purposes. I would request you to please bring this up when we do the scheduling meeting, and so that I can free the witnesses and we can get the work done, because if we have to schedule meeting for next week's, I need some answers today.
Est-ce que vous voulez demander aux collègues s'ils veulent prolonger la séance de comité, Madame?
Do you want to ask the colleagues if they want to extend the time for this meeting, Madam Chair?
The members to extend the time for few minutes. I see some heads saying no, so there is no unanimous consent to extend the time. Binur Mohammed.
So we've got theoretically 7 minutes left. In that time, we need to be able to do scheduling, I presume. We've got a question from Maxine that needs to be addressed. How do we propose to do all of this in 7 minutes, I guess, is the question. What can we reasonably do in 7 minutes? Yeah.
Get some answers for the next week, because otherwise we will have to cancel the meeting on Thursday. So if it is the will of the members to get the meeting cancelled for Thursday, because if I don't get some answers today, yeah, so that means that we have to make some decision today. Yeah. So with that, I would like to thank both our witnesses. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, and thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for your important testimonies and taking out time to appear before the committee. So you can leave now while we do some business part of this meeting. Okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks a lot once again. Okay, so with that, I would like to get back to some of the scheduling part which we have to do. For next Monday, April 27th, will be our last meeting on the EV study, so witnesses are scheduled for that. The committee needs to determine its next study, and pursuant to the practice of this committee, what we have seen in the last year, it would be now the turn of the Liberal Party to choose the next study. The committee adopted few motions to that effect on February 9th, and I will turn to the Liberal members to know which one will be the next study. MP McKelvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be pleased to recommend that we undertake the study on the role of universities and colleges, the National Research Council of Canada, the federal departments, and industry experts in supporting Canada's dual-use and defence research needs as a component of NATO spending targets.
Okay, so this motion was adopted on February 9th. Is everyone okay? Yep. Okay, that is good. So that will be our next study. And I would like to bring it to everyone's attention that the committee can resume the consideration of the draft reports on AMR. The version 2 will be sent to the members as soon as possible.
Likely tomorrow.
Okay, so the version 2 of AMR will be sent to the members by tomorrow. And and we also have to commence the consideration of the draft report on the impact of the criteria for awarding federal funding on research excellence in Canada on Thursday, April 30th. So my suggestion is that I don't think so we need much time for the AMR version 2. We can quickly do that, and we can give a draft so that the analysts can start working and we don't waste much of the time. We can quickly give drafting instructions on AI and the this EV vehicles study. We can give, and then we can go into the consideration of the draft report for the impact of criteria for awarding federal funding on research excellence for coming Thursday. That will be April 30th. Does that work with everybody? MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Madame la Présidente, juste comprendre à quel moment vous avez
Madam
planifié.
Chair, I want to just to understand, when did we plan the study of the reports concerning antimicrobial issues and concerning the criteria awarding federal funding on research excellence? When did you plan that?
If we can keep the noise level a little low, if I can have everyone's attention, please. That's what I am suggesting, that for next week, Monday, we have the witnesses for the EV study. And on Thursday, the meeting will be for the consideration of the draft reports and drafting instructions. So we will quickly go through version 2 of the AMR. We will give drafting instructions on AI study and the EV, and then get into the consideration of the draft report on the impact of the criteria for awarding federal funding on research. So that will be April 30th. MP McKelvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to confirm then that the dual-use research study will start on May 4th, and what will the deadline for witnesses be?
Yes, that's what the clerk is asking. Yeah, so that's what the clerk is asking me, that we have to decide the date for the submission of the witnesses. Is it possible that we can do it by tomorrow before the end of the day? Yeah. Okay. So, because if we have to schedule it for May 1st, so my suggestion would be if partial list can be submitted by tomorrow, and then the final list to be submitted by Monday, 5 p.m. April 27th, Monday, 5 p.m. Okay? And
Madame la Présidente, c'est trop serré, à mon avis, là. 24 heures de préavis.
Madam Chair, that is very tight, 24 hours of notice for these witnesses. We've never done that before.
we have to resume study, so you can give a partial list, like whatever number you can give, and then the final submission of the witness list will be Monday, 5 p.m. MP Noor Mohammed.
As we come to an end, I wanted to raise something that had come up earlier in the movement of the committee. One of the challenges, I think, so we've thus far, I think, managed to, over the course as well, work in a reasonably collegial, collaborative format. A couple of members have expressed some concern over some reasonably unparliamentary language that was used, and in particular, a comment that was made about somebody that may or may not consider switching teams that folks were pretty offended by. And among us, I mean, I wonder if there's a way we could try to just, I don't think it was on very much on the record. That's part of the challenge. Like, we got to just,
Thank you, MP Noor Mohammed, for pointing that, and I would request all the members to use the parliamentary language and work collegiately with each other. This is one of the topics, I think, where too much partisan politics is not needed, and I think we can do important work and contribute towards building Canada strong. So I hope the members can work together. Canada strong is not partisan. Building Canada strong is not partisan. So one quick thing before we end this meeting. So the committee adopted a motion to invite the chief statistician, the president of the NRC, the chief science advisor, and the president of the Canadian Space Agency, each for 2 hours on March 23rd. So Lisa Campbell, president of the CSA, is confirmed for Monday, May 25th. The chief statistician is confirmed for May 28th. The president of the NRC would be available June 4th, 8th, or 18th. Can we send an invitation for June 4th? Would that work with everybody? Okay. And the chief science advisor has scheduled activities outside Canada in May and would be available in June. We could invite her for June 1st or June 8th. Okay. Yes, MP Noor Mohammed.
Madam Chair, so then from a scheduling standpoint, so we have the last meeting on EVs coming up. The meeting after that is going to be presumably the draft reports. God willing, we get through all of the draft reports in that meeting, inshallah. If not, then off we go to the next one. But assuming we do, then we have break weeks. We would have 2 meetings on this study, then we would go into the science advisors?
So what we will do is, for next week, we will have the last meeting on the EV, the consideration of the draft reports, and then we will start the study, the new study, and we have break weeks coming up. So we will see, for the rest of the work, based on the dates which have been given, which are already scheduled for this motion, which was passed on 23rd. In regards to the chief statistician, and then we will schedule the rest of the meetings.
My point is, it seems like once we finish with the advisors, we have 2 more meetings left on the upcoming study, and then we're pretty much done.
Yes. Fine. So I will plot all these things in a calendar.
Fine.
And
Perfect.
Clerk can send it to everyone.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think we can.
4 on defense. This is 4. That's 8, and we have 2 10. Do we have 10? Yeah, we have enough. 10 plus 4, 14.
Plus 6 weeks left.
6 weeks, but 2
so
are
before
off.
we rise for the summer. So I will put everything in the calendar and work with the clerk.
We won't finish.
Yeah, well, I will work on the calendar with the clerk, and then the clerk will send a tentative calendar to all the members. Is it will of the committee to adjourn the meeting?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned.